Symbols have power. Whatever they might be, they always hold some deeper meaning to them. They are used by humans to signify belonging into a group or to exert control over others. Some are even said to have magical powers. All of these properties can be observed in the national arms of Ukraine, the Trident or trezubets. Since 1918, it has been featured upon the Ukrainian coat of arms, a blue shield with a golden border, and a golden trident within it. Derivations of this symbol appear in other Ukrainian organizations, including the Association of Football. Official use of the symbol was proposed in 1917 by historian Mykhailo Hrushevskyi, and he got it from an 11th century monarch, Vladimir the Great. Vladimir was the baptizer of Rus and ruled from the city of Kiev, nowadays the capital of Ukraine. He primarily punched the symbol into gold and silver coins, along with his likeness, in order to assert his control over the country. But it was used to represent him in other official capacities, appearing, for example, on structures erected by him. His descendants would inherit the symbol, but each of them would modify it, make it more unique to them. It has of course been disputed what the symbol is supposed to depict. One of the most common interpretations, dating to the second half of the 19th century, is that it's a diving falcon. In terms of shape, it makes a lot of sense. We have the wings, the body and tail, and the beaked head. The symbol is in fact often called Rurik's Falcon. It is very similar to the modern coat of arms of Staraya Ladega, believed to be the first city in Rus, but I don't know when the coat of arms was first implemented. It could simply be a coincidence, or perhaps Rurik's sign was even adapted into a falcon to make for a nice flag. The falcon appeared as a common enough symbol in Rus, and was seemingly common among Vikings. Findings of the symbol have been found from Bretagne to Ukraine, but are especially associated with the town of Birka, where a site called the Garrison contained many of them. The site is called the Garrison owing to the findings of military equipment, much of which bore Eastern nomadic influence. It is believed that the Garrison was the base for a group of professional soldiers who had influence deep into the Russian trade route. And the international findings of these eagles do perhaps tell a story of these warriors' far-flung adventures. The eagles appear most commonly on sword shapes, that's the bottom of a scabbard, but also as mounts upon shields, brooches, or even the keys which the Garrison warriors used to lock their chests. One cannot help but compare it to the eagle so common among the Visigoths, which might have been adapted from the Roman eagle. As we shall discuss later on, it is common for those in power to adapt previous symbols in order to usurp the power that comes with them. Just look at all the countries using eagles as a tribute to the Roman Empire. The falcon of the Viking warriors may originally have derived from it, or they just like the bird. Another prevalent idea is that the falcon was a Baltic Slavic symbol, Wendish to be precise. It is believed that the falcon was called Rarog, and that the name of Rurik, the mythical founder of Rus, derives from this word as well. Thus, Rurik was not only named after the falcon, but used it as his symbol, and passed it on to his descendants. It is a neat and tidy explanation, but has a couple of issues. The biggest one is that the trident did not appear in Rus until the reign of Vladimir in the 980s, over 100 years after the alleged death of Rurik. The trident was preceded by the Bident, also called trezubets. The trident used by Vladimir was most likely an evolution of a dynastic sign. The Bident was used by his father, Sviatoslav, but again, it was a Bident, not a trident, and though the Bident of Sviatoslav does sort of resemble a bird, at least the wings, the Bident which preceded it does not look very much like a bird. The earliest example of this symbol was cut as graffiti into an Arabic silver coin, found in a hoard on the island of Gotland. The hoard had been deposited between 880 and 885, so a couple years after the alleged death of Rurik. It appears as though the Bident had at least come into use on the trade network around this time, probably a few years earlier. There have been other proposals as what the symbol is supposed to depict. If it began as a Bident, it is very likely meant to depict a boat. If you decide to add a mast to it, it becomes Vladimir's trident. It is reminiscent of boat depictions from picture stones on Gotland, only departure being the addition of the spike on the bottom of the Bident, which could be a representation of the keel. but there are no depictions of boats which feature anything like the spike, which makes the boat idea less believable. Boats were obviously an important symbol of the Vikings and the Rus, who fought from their boats and used travel upon the riverways to trade and control their country. A sort of pet favorite of mine is that the symbol might depict an arrowhead. Fork-shaped arrowheads with a double set of prongs pointing down towards the shaft and the spike pointing in the opposite direction were popular in Eastern Europe during the 9th and 10th centuries. A compilation of discovered arrowheads shows that 83 of them were forked, compared to 700 finds of the classical lancet type. The function of the forked arrowhead has not been discerned. The peculiar shape makes the arrow fly less efficiently than common arrowheads. It has been explained as being designed for hunting, but the sort has appeared in battle. In medieval Japan, forked arrowheads called korimata were used. The name derives from their resemblance to a flying flock of geese. Some were provided with a whistle that would activate upon shooting, and were used to signal an attack. These karimata were shot in volleys in order to cause mass damage, but were less efficient against armor. Nothing is known of how these arrowheads were used among the Rus, except that they had a symbolic value. In a hoard deposited sometime in the first half of the 10th century was found a coin graffitied with a forked arrowhead and the prow of a ship. To understand the meaning of this, we first gotta talk about coin graffiti. Vladimir the Great was the first Rus-Gayan ruler to mint his own domestic coins. Before then, the Rus didn't mint their own coins. Instead, they took Arabic or Byzantine silver coins and used them as currency. And coins were not only a means of exchange, but also a means with which to exert authority. By having the symbols of the ruler upon the coin, it became evident under whose authority you were trading. So instead of minting your own coins, you could instead graffiti existing coins with your symbols, as a marking of your authority. Examples of coin graffiti in Rus include swords, standards, spears, boats, drinking horns, hammers of Thor, the Bident, and even Christian crosses come the occasion. All of these symbols had a martial or religious meaning, both of which were associated with the upper class, or the private retinue of professional warriors. It is unknown if these symbols all belonged to a single ruler, to individual warriors, or even different warlords present in the region. But if the forked arrowhead was to serve as a model for the most important symbol, the Bident and then the Trident, then the arrowhead must have had some specific meaning. If the arrowhead was intended for hunting, well, hunting held a special role among the social elite of the early Middle Ages. In general, it was a source of food and an important social ritual, and as a method to exercise martial values outside of warfare. Among the Rus, hunting was especially important, as it was the source of the precious furs that made up the chief export to Byzantium and the Caliphate. Furs would be used as a sort of currency within Rus, and the first Rus civil war was caused by friction between rival hunting parties. Shoving the possibilities of a Nordic and domestic origin aside, the most commonly accepted idea is that Rurik's sign began as a Tamga, a sort of clan symbol used by the nomads of Central Asia. The earliest usage of Tamgis can be dated back to the Sarmatians, an Iranian-speaking people inhabiting the Pontic steppe. The Sarmatians used them to mark possessions, including weapons and jewelry, items placed inside of tombs belonging to noble clans. Since the Tamgas were passed on patrimonially, i.e. from father to child, historians can actually reconstruct the histories of these families, their upturns and downturns, weddings and displacements, but I digress. The Tamga would then become adopted by the Bosporan kingdom, sometime between the 1st and 4th century AD. The rulers of the kingdom were descended from Sarmatians, and used the Tamga as a symbol of state authority. Much like the descendants of Vladimir, the son of a Bosporan ruler would modify his father's Tamga to make it his own. When the Bosporan kingdom finally fell, the Iranian nomads, Sarmatians and Alans, continued to use the Tamga per tradition. It even seems to have been adapted by Byzantine colonies in Crimea, once part of the Bosporan. They would mark different objects in a similar fashion. The Alans would make up a majority of the population of the Khazar Khaganate, and it seems like they passed on the use of the Tamga. Across the Khazarian dominion, especially at the lower Don, Tamgas can be found on bricks and stones, and part of old fortifications belonging to the clans. and Tamgas could be found on tools and household goods, and used as potter's marks to indicate what family the workshop belonged to. They include both Bidents and Tridents. From 7th century Kiev was even discovered a spinning wheel with a trident, most likely produced by one of the clans. If Kiev belonged to them or if the wall was simply imported is uncertain. And Tamgas were even used for cattle branding. The Khazars managed a vast trading network between the Caspian and northern reaches. From northern tribes they extorted tribute in the form of furs, which were shipped southward in return for silver. When the Rus entered the scene in the late 8th century, they began claiming tributaries of their own, and taking over parts of the fur trade, and seemingly becoming a vassal or trade partner to the Khazars. The Rus adapted many elements of Eastern nomadic customs, including clothes and equipment. Most importantly, the ruler of the Rus seems to have called himself Khagan, same as the ruler of the Khazars. A similar process of a Slavic, sedentary state adopting Turkic Tamgas can be seen in the Second Bulgarian Empire. On this 14th century map, they are depicted with a flag very similar to a Tamga. Much like Rus, the Bulgarians were closely connected to the nomads. A more simplified variant appears on this map, a few decades younger. It is impossible to prove a Nordic, domestic or Khazar origin of the symbol itself, but it was certainly used in a similar fashion to the nomadic Tamga. As aforementioned, Tamgas and other symbols of the Rus warriors were carved into silver coins to mark their belonging. But the sign would have been used in other capacities. It has been found on a handful of other objects than coins, including items of bone and stone. Wooden items would sadly have perished, so there doesn't seem to be any traces of buildings or such marked with it. Most important are perhaps the pendants marked with the sign. These would have been used by state officials to mark their belonging to the ruler. One of these pendants had been found in Gniostava. It is made of silver and copper, and carries the pendant on one side and a banner upon the other. Another pendant, found in Novgorod, is made of ivory and has 2 tridents in it. However, it is believed that it was a Bident originally, with the middle jag added later on. Most likely, the pendant belonged first to an official of Sviatoslav, who used the Bident, and was then used by an official of his son, Vladimir, who used the trident. Another important use of the sign was as a seal for the signing of documents. A lead seal with a Bident was discovered in Kiev and dated to the reign of Sviatoslav. It is marked by a little cross above the Bident, indicating a faith in Christianity. However, Sviatoslav was a staunch pagan, so the seal most likely belonged to his mother and regent, Olga, who was baptized in Constantinople and became a devout Christian. A similar Bident with a cross was found in Sarkel, on a piece of amphora. Seals are mentioned in the Rus-Byzantine Treaty of 945, as recounted in the primary chronicle. They were carried by agents and merchants to certify their allegiance. The chronicle reads as follows: "The great prince of Rus and his boyars shall send to Greece and the great Greek emperors as many ships as they desire with their agents and merchants, according to the prevailing usage. The agents hitherto carried gold seals, and the merchants silver ones. But your prince has now made known that he will forward a certificate to our government, and any agents or merchants thus sent by the Rus shall be provided with such a certificate to the effect that a given number of ships has been dispatched. By this means we shall be assured that they come with peaceful intent. But if such persons come uncertified and are surrendered to us, we shall detain and hold them until we notify your prince. If they do not surrender but offer resistance, they shall be killed, and the indemnity for their death shall not be extracted by your prince. If, however, they flee to Rus, we shall so inform your prince, and he shall deal with them as he sees fit." What the certificate looked like exactly is not certain. Perhaps a piece of paper or birch bark with a text written on it, or simply signed with the prince's seal. But it would no longer suffice for the merchants and agents to carry their own seals with them. The Bident as an official symbol of the Rus state can be dated no earlier than the reign of Sviatoslav. His sign most likely looked like this one, found on an ivory plate from Sarkel, a Khazarian city which Sviatoslav conquered and renamed Belaya Vesha. Sviatoslav spent most of his long reign at war, campaigning between Greece and the Caspian. It appears as if Sviatoslav left his mark in places he visited. In the sepulchre of a Bosporan king near the modern city of Kerch, 3 Bidents had been carved in the 10th century, most likely during Sviatoslav's eastern campaign. During his attack on the Bulgars in 967, it appears as though he left his Bident in Basarabia, modern Romania, in the walls of a complex of caves beneath a church. Before a church was constructed upon the caves, it appears they were used as a quarry for the extraction of limestone. Sviatoslav might have needed this stone for the building of fortifications. Upon the death of Sviatoslav, his dominion was divided between his sons. Vladimir would adapt his father's Bident into the trident we're so familiar with, by adding an additional mark in the center. Vladimir had a disadvantage of being a bastard, born to a housekeeper, and having grown up in Novgorod, he was quite a stranger to Kiev, regarded as a foreigner. Thus, he understood quite well the need for symbols to establish legitimacy. He was quite desperate to affirm his reign. His usage of the Bident even predates the death of his father, as it first appeared on the ivory pendant from Novgorod, likely modified from a Bident to a trident. We know of at least one building bearing the sign of Vladimir, the Tyves Church, the first stone church ever constructed in Kiev. As per pagan Slavic tradition, it was constructed using a sum of the prince's tithe, hence the name, and Vladimir's trident was found inscribed in one of the stones. Most importantly, Vladimir was the first ruler of Rus to mint his own coins. Going by the Byzantine fashion, he struck his likeness into each of them, along with his personal sign. On some of the coins, the sign is small and placed next to Vladimir. On other ones, large and on its own upon the other side. His coins are a unique phenomenon in the Viking Age, in that they're the only ones to bear any dynastic symbols. It does show how desperate Vladimir was to assert his authority. Into each of the coins was written, Vladimir on the throne, in Slavic, mind you, not Greek, allowing more of his subjects to understand it. There are also a couple of pendants found with Vladimir's sign. One as far away as Perm, and close to the Ural Mountains. The other side of it bears a Thor's hammer. Since Vladimir minted his own coins, this period doesn't have any coins with his sign cut as graffiti. Indeed, his sign seems to have been used in a very limited capacity, indicating that use of it might have been restricted. It appears as though the sign was only used by the government, and those associated with it. It is unknown which of the Rus rulers first began using the Bident, but there is a slight difference between the one carved into coins and the one used by Sviatoslav. The beak is more significant. Thus, it isn't entirely certain if Sviatoslav began the tradition of modifying his father's sign, but it is very evident that Vladimir lived by it. It isn't known if his brothers used any rival modifications, but upon the death of Vladimir, his sons would continue the tradition of modifying their father's sign into their own. Eventually they'd become near unrecognizable from the original, until the Rus stopped using them altogether in the mid-12th century, also coinciding with the collapse of the unified country. And so, the symbol would remain dormant until the 19th century, when it was picked up by historians as a symbol of the Rurikids. Finally, in 1918, the Republic of Ukraine began to use it as a coat of arms, Vladimir's sign specifically, and so it remains to this day. The choice of colors of the coat of arms, blue and yellow, derives both from popular symbolism and history. The coat of arms of the West Ukrainian lands, as ruled by the Polish-Lithuanian government, was a yellow lion upon a blue shield. The popular symbolism is of a blue sky and yellow wheat field, since Ukraine serves as an international breadbasket. Anti-Ukrainian memes often joke about the blue representing tears, and the yellow a certain other bodily fluid of the self-same color. Speaking of anti-Ukrainian memes, there appears to be an online conspiracy theory claiming that the sign originates from the sigil of Moloch, a Canaanite deity which the Bible associated with child sacrifice. The image associates the sigil of Moloch and the Khazarian Tamga with a Satanist pentagram. The idea seems to be that Khazarian Jews worshipped Moloch and Satan, and probably something like rabbis using baby foreskins for sacrifices or something. The idea is that modern Ukraine is a secret continuation of the Jewish Khazar state, and that they practice child sacrifice. This idea is then used to justify the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The biggest hole in this theory is that Rurik's sign did not begin as a trident, but as a Bident, which could be a similarities to a horned figure, sure, but also to a gorilla and other things. It's going in the bin. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you found it interesting. I personally enjoy the history of symbols, and tracking this one down was a lot of fun. YouTube is my full-time job, so I am dependent on a steady stream of income to continue making videos. If you enjoy them and want to see me continuing to make them, please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter or making a one-time donation. If only 1,000 of my regular viewers would donate $1 per month, that would pretty much guarantee the long-term survival of the channel. If you want to watch more, I've got plenty more videos, and even a secondary channel called Golden Gunpowder, where I cover the golden age of piracy. Please enjoy, I'll see you soon.